Hey everyone, it's Peter Kerr from Rock Daydream Nation, and today I'm going to be covering 1984, the self-titled debut of W.A.S.P. And to share the discussion of this very controversial album is John Clauser. How are you, John?
Thank you, Peter. Thank you for having me on. I'm doing great. Any day's a good day to talk about WASP for me. So this is good.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, what we're going to do is we're going to cover our five favorite songs, ranking from five to one in respect of Wasp's debut album. And then we're going to probably contextualize a lot about Wasp, their career, the furor of this album in the day, and maybe talk about a little bit about where Wasp are at this point in time and how it's, the original album is looked back on. So, without further ado, John, why don't you hit me with your number five selection of this album?
Okay, so for me, trying to actually rank the songs on this album is like if I had 10 kids and I had to pick which one was my favorite. I have so much history with this album. So for me to actually really go back and like be more objective in my approach, um, I would say number five has got to be, and I'm just going to go off the cuff because I just made the decision. I'm just going to start off with off with a bang. Tormentor,
Okay.
number nine track,
Right. Okay.
featured in this little movie here called Dungeon Master on this
Yes.
little two for Blu-ray thingy. And there's a picture of Blackie right there from the movie
Right.
performing Tormentor in the movie. Um, the thing I think that grabs me so much about Tormentor and really all of these songs, Wasp was just they were like a really dangerous band to listen to. It's like they took Kiss and Alice Cooper and I'm sure there's and probably Elvis and maybe a few other bands into a totally different level. So they brought the horror element into the show, and they made it was like a soundtrack to what was going on the stage. And Tormentor really exemplifies that. They bring out the torture rack, with the woman on there, and they do the mock killing of the woman on the stage. That was something Wasp was well known for in their heyday. In their really early days was the crazy stuff they were doing on stage, with the raw meat, the drinking blood out of a skull, and the tormentor rack, and just all these different crazy things that they were doing on stage. And Tormentor to me is just a great example of that. Um, Lord knows it inspired me probably to write a lot of knockoff songs from
Yep.
that. I wrote a song in high school that I say is a cousin to Tormentor, a very distant cousin, but it's a cousin. So yes, so Tormentor would be probably my number five. But then again, the other songs that I don't pick in my top five would probably be tied for fifth.
Yeah. No. Understand. Understand. Look, Wasp had very strong imagery, and you could say that they were probably predated Marilyn Manson. So in 1984, the furor that was created by Wasp for a moment, and we'll have to be, sort of be objective here, it was a moment. You could say that Marilyn Manson definitely picked up that thread and pushed it even further. And the influences of Wasp were clearly in the shock rock of Alice Cooper. You had Blackie Lawless, who was in New York Dolls, not for a very long time. And there is some conjecture as to was it the official New York Dolls, but it was definitely a couple of generations in the very later lineup. He progressed through London and a few other bands, but he pushed a very strong image. It was definitely on the horror shock route. And ultimately, it probably killed them commercially in America because I don't think 1984 America or the world was ready for that sort of imagery.
Mm-mm. Not on a big scale, like say an Iron Maiden or what, even Kiss. Well, even Kiss kind of got scaled back after they took the makeup off. But I mean, yeah, to those levels, yeah.
Absolutely. And they had Maiden's manager, I believe, Ron Smallwood.
Yep, they did.
And I think there was quite uncertainty in W.A.S.P's career. I think there was a number of missteps and mistakes, and that ultimately crippled them commercially and stunted their growth, perhaps artistically. Do they go down the shock route and push it as far as you can go, or what happened in The Last Command? And I like The Last Command. Musically, there's a lot of depth. There's a lot of layers, but it was going into the MTV more commercial favorable type of sound.
Yeah.
So the fans that were accrued over the first album, which had very strong imagery, and you just look at this is like plays up to the horror.
Oh, absolutely.
And one thing I sort of noticed only just recently, the two eyes in the back. I never used this. Noticed that. But when I was pre-teenager at school, this was an album that was definitely handed around along with the Iron Maiden. Now, if they went in the Maiden imagery and sort of went down that wheelhouse or that path, they may have had better commercial fortunes, but they just about flipped and went down something that was ultimately more commercial, but they lost their fan base. And let's face it, the people that were into something that was more attractive and poppy and hair metal, and W.A.S.P put in the hair metal classification. I don't sort of subscribe to that, and I'll tell you why as we go through the discussion. And that ultimately sort of crippled their career. Anyway, my number 5 song is School Days. And I think it's like probably School's Out number 2. It's got witty lyrics, and Blackie, when he's on point, he can write fairly witty tongue-in-cheek lyrics, not to be taken too seriously, but there's a little bit of, irony, and there's a little bit of social commentary. And I like the whole idea of School Days, where he's relating school to a jail. We're locked up in this prison hell and we've got to get out. So I think
12 years and I'm counting the days. Yep.
So when you've got somebody that's kind of, I wouldn't say he was middle-aged, but in his 20s and talking about school and teenage type of topics, it's a very fine line. And I've done this on other discussions. It can be embarrassing, like Judas Priest, parental guidance. That's embarrassing. But this one, lyrically, he just got himself on the right side of being clever and not too embarrassing. And it's got a great riff. And another thing I've got to say about this whole album, Tony Richards' drumming is phenomenal.
Yes, it is.
And I don't think it was until maybe Frankie Banali had that grunt in the engine room.
Yeah.
But anyway, I think it's a great riff. And that's my number 5, School Days.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I completely agree with you on Tony Richards. I was listening to that album on the way home and I was just like air drumming to him the entire time. I was like,
the bottom end, the bass. I prefer Blackie on bass and linking up with Tony Richards. And Tony Richards, it's like sort of whatever happened to Tony Richards. And I've read stories that he was going through some pretty severe drug addiction during the recording of that album. He was on heroin. And I think he actually resurfaced for a podcast just recently. But everyone, one of the things, the positives off this album that everyone talks about is Tony Richards' drumming, because it is just absolutely monstrous. And the production on this album is pretty spiff. I like this.
Yeah, with Mike Barney's production is great.
Yeah, it's really got the right sort of production. A lot of those albums from that era had pretty dated production, mid-rangey and not very nice. But the production on this album just sounds really fresh. Anyway, that's my number 5.
Yeah, I completely agree on that. And that the other thing is Tony Richards, he wasn't like all over the place. He caught in that pocket and he stayed there, and he maximized with by minimizing kind of things. He just didn't need to be doing double bass. He didn't need to be cymbal clashing all the time. Yeah. Very good. Number 4, again, this is such a hard choice. LOVE Machine, Love Machine. You gotta stick that in there. Again, you gotta love the Tony Richards drum beat that brings it in, the riff, the lyrics, again, those dangerous, but something's catchy about this guy. Yeah.
Yep.
It-
Again,
it-
you look at the video, very strong imagery, pushing it out there. Yeah, that's a really good choice.
Yep.
My number 4 is Sleeping in the Fire. So that's probably the closest to their ballad. I think Blackie had a good sense of rock heritage. A lot of his influences were the 70s and those classic bands, Uriah Heep and Ken Hensley. He drafted in to do a lot of recording sessions. I think it was the Headless
Children, as well as their cover of Easy Living.
But a lot of his musical roots were to the early 70s, Mountain, Uriah Heep, Purple. And this is like a power ballad that I could imagine could be done in the 70s, but he's just done an 80s twist to it. Great production. It's monstrous. And that's my number 4, Sleeping in the Fire.
More on that in a couple minutes. Okay. So for me, my top 3 were actually kind of be the easiest of the pick. It was just after that was going to be a little challenging. So, riding, a heavy metal child thunders down the highway. Hellion. That's going to be my number 3. It's got to be Hellion. Again, that Tony Richards drum beat, that the simple guitar chords, but Blackie's chilling voice that starts, everything just works so well on that song for me. And it's just, again, the little bit of vocal interplay, the guitar playing, everything just comes together so strong on that song. It's always been one of my favorites again. So
very good.
Going Hellion.
Great riffage on that album. And Chris Holmes, his guitar work is very tasty, nice little licks. And with all the tabloid aspect of Chris Holmes, his addictions, the decline of Western civilization, metal years didn't help.
No.
The persona actually detracted of him being a very tasty guitarist.
He was. Or he is. I shouldn't say. What am I saying? He is.
As a songwriter, that's probably kind of dubious because you think that Blackie did a lot of the heavy lifting on this album. In fact, he's done a lot of the heavy lifting on his career, and that has probably, controversially, maybe in my opinion, sort of been a leg iron around W.A.S.P. I think Blackie probably needed a good collaborator just to sort of sound off. But he's been doing everything. It's basically the Blackie show. And that can be illustrated by The Last Command, where who's on the front cover? Blackie.
Right.
And I know the band was...
Who's on this? The whole band.
Yeah, absolutely. So it goes from a band, but it's really Blackie. He's doing all of the instrument, sort of the arrangements and the songwriting. And The Last Command, where it's clearly him front and center. And that has probably been a negative for the development of the band, because I think in his songwriting, he probably needed a good collaborator. And it was probably good that he got Ken Hensley in his later years. I don't know the intimate details of what Ken Hensley, but he would have appreciated sort of the influences and the sort of synergy of Ken in regards to some of the arrangements that would have rubbed off in his songwriting at that point. He probably needed something like a Ken Hensley or a very strong collaborator to say, Blackie, this is not quite right. Why don't we do it this way? Yeah. I think he had a lot of yes people in the band that were musically very good, but he's running the show. And that's not necessarily a good thing in rock.
Not always, which is probably why when you go on W.A.S.P. Facebook groups, everybody just wants to hear this, Last Command, or Inside the Electric Circus, You get some that goes into Headless Children. You got some who love Crimson Idol. Or you want the KFD, which has Chris Holmes back in the band, but nobody pretty much pays attention to the 2000s on, with maybe a few exceptions, and maybe again not always for the good reasons. Would I love to see Doug Blair, his current guitar player, do that kind of Chris Holmes writing with him? Sure, I would. I would love to hear what Doug would add to the writing. Same with Mike Duda, bass player. He's been with him since KFD.
Yeah,
These guys have been in the band longer than Chris and Randy and Steve Riley and all those guys were. So I'm like,
I think there's probably another element to this, because I'm sort of saying Blackie was the sole songwriter. There has been a point of conjecture from Chris that he did a lot of the writing, but Blackie took a lot of the credit. So I've got to put that in today's chat and put it out there. Sure. But on the premise that Blackie does the majority of everything, I think that has been a leg iron around his ankles in respect of, the development of W.A.S.P. And let's face it, on this first album, from what I understand and what I read, it was tumultuous. You've got Tony Richards, who was pretty quickly out of the band because he had addictions, but monstrous drummer. You had Chris Holmes. Anecdotally, we know the Chris Holmes of what he would have been pretty wild. And then there's all sorts of other elements. You had the controversy with the image of W.A.S.P. The PRMC was attacking W.A.S.P. because of a particular song that was on this album and dropped called F Like a Beast, which realistically I don't think is a very good song, but it got him a lot of publicity.
It was great when I was 15, but by the time Headless Children came out, I'm like, I'm beyond that.
It's not a very good song. And off the back of the controversy, did you know that song actually charted in the UK charts? It was on the Music for Nations label.
The Music for Nations label, yep.
The actual picture disc is, very sort of strong under that horror. So there's a lot of elements to the W.A.S.P. story. Quite interesting when you look at it, sort of take a seat back and just look at the story. It's just very interesting, but you can see there's been a lot of decisions that have stunted the growth. This album only attained gold status in 1994. Took a long time.
Yeah,
to reach that. And it's the only album that has been certified with the RIAA. So they've had they had a lot of fire in 1984, a lot of heat, and then they sort of were in the back of the pack. And you would see them being support to a number of bands. And I used to read stories in Kerrang where they would support, be on a triple bill with Slayer and another speed metal band, and they would just get dissed on stage. They would be trying to go for that market, but that sort of audience, everyone had moved, their fan base that were grown up on this had moved into speed metal and moved on.
Yep.
So there's a lot of interesting elements to this story, but all right, getting back onto the my number 3 is Tormentor. I think it's a very new wave of British heavy metal sound, and a lot of the album has a very new wave of British heavy metal sound. Very sort of pinpoint riffage, very just out there, not glossy. So it picks up on what I'm saying about Blackie. I think he's got a lot of appreciation and heritage for not only early 70s hard rock, but what was happening in the sites, the new wave of British heavy metal in the late 70s. And Blackie by 1984 was a very seasoned performer. He was in London, and London was basically a fly-in pad for who's who. I mean, who hasn't been in London? Nikki Sixx was in London. Various others.
Gosh,
that
all
was
kinds
just
of people. Yeah.
So that was like a training ground.
Yeah.
But no, this song to me, my ears can fall into the Judas Priest Saxon wheelhouse. It's very new wave of British heavy metal, and Tormentor is my number 3.
And a great, again, Can't go wrong with that choice. My number two, you alluded to it earlier, Sleeping in the Fire. One of the first W.A.S.P songs I learned how to play on guitar. And just again, that haunting Blackie voice on that song. That clean acoustic guitar, everything, and then just the guitars come in, and then that brilliant Chris Holmes solo that just fits just right.
Yeah, I agree. It's a good song. It's a good song.
And I love the live version that's on Live in the Raw just as much. I love the solo that Chris takes on and just extends it out and just great song.
Well, I'll say it again. For whatever the tabloid aspect of Chris Holmes and the controversy, he definitely had talent and knew how to pull a tasty lick out of nowhere. And that's a really good song that illustrates that point. One thing I want to talk to you about is Blackie's voice. Now, Blackie to me has a very similar voice to Noddy Holder of Slade. Are you familiar with Slade?
Oh yeah. I'm familiar with Slade. I could see it. I could see it.
That really sort of gravelly and projected voice. Noddy from Slade. I really think he has that. And throughout this album, it's always got a little bit of echo on Blackie's vocals and double tracking background vocals. Now, I know when you look at the album, it says Tony, who did the backing vocals, it said that the backing vocals were Tony Richards. I find
Tony and Randy.
I find that interesting that he would be doing vocals, and Randy Piper.
Yeah.
But to me, it sounds like they've done a double tracking of Blackie's vocals.
Blackie's voice.
And that seems to be prevalent through all of W.A.S.P's albums. Very echoey, projects it out, that sort of gravelly sort of voice.
It's a harsh voice, but it's brilliant at the same time.
Yeah.
But
I've always thought Noddy, there's lineage between Slade. And again, I wouldn't be also surprised that in Blackie's iPod collection, he's got a few Slade sort of
I never thought of that.
Yeah. And similar vocal to Kevin DeBrow of Quiet Riot.
Oh yeah.
Similar, that type of vocal, that gravelly vocal. Again, they just mined the Slade catalog and got a few hits. So, but that's something every time I listen to W.A.S.P, I think Noddy. I always think,
I never thought of that before, but that's brilliant. I'll have to. Yeah. Now I got to go back and listen to some Slade.
Yeah, there's a lot of layers to W.A.S.P because I think everyone sort of unfairly just looks at the shock, and there's a shock element, and that was, again, I'm bringing this up. That was probably the leg iron around their ankles, but the songs are there. There's musicology, there's songs. It's probably the imagery that sort of overwhelmed them. Anyway, over to you. I think it's your choice.
What was your number two?
My choice was Helion.
Oh.
Okay. Helion was my number two. And I just sort of said it was a great Blackie vocal. And it sounds like he's in the pits of hell. And I wrote down here, love the double tracking of the vocals. So yeah, it was actually my number two.
Okay.
There you go.
All right. So that leaves the top one. Let's just say, so the story on this one for me, when I was supposed to go see Iron Maiden with two of my best friends in high school, and unfortunately the show got canceled because the band was sick after being in hot Rio, and then they go to cold New York, and a lot of people caught the flu. So unfortunately I didn't get to see Maiden at that point. Later in the year I did. But my buddies and we decided to get together, and we went to the mall. We were, the Twisted Sister was the opening act that was supposed to be there. So we had never heard Under the Blade or You Can't Stop Rock and Roll. So My one friend got Under the Blade. The other one got You
Mm,
Can't Stop Rock and Roll. And I was like, hey, I want to get something a little different, something new. And so my one
mm,
buddy told me about this. And I'm like, okay, I'm hooked. This is like January 1985.
mm,
So I'm like, okay, I'm hooked. So we finally get around to putting my cassette of this on.
mm.
As soon as that, soon as that song hits, I was hooked like a fish coming out of water quickly. I want to be somebody after a Barney Miller skit of all things. But yes, I want to be somebody has got to be the song for me. I
And
mean,
that's also my number one. So
yeah,
we're both on the. I mean, that is the go-to track,
oh,
and it holds up very well.
because
And
think of
it's
it. How many
yeah,
people still feel like this today?
yep,
You listen to the lyrics, people
absolutely,
still feel like that. Who wants to work
absolutely,
9 to 5, your fingers to the bone? Nobody wants to do that,
yep.
you
So
know?
and about song listing and song tracking, it's in prime position, and song
Mm-hmm.
tracking is very important. And wham, you put the slab of vinyl down, you put the needle in the groove, and that's the first song that comes on.
Yep.
It's making a statement. So
And it was quite a statement. Oof. I mean, like I
absolutely,
said, it hooked me.
absolutely. Interested you say Twisted Sister, because I think that Twisted Sister in a way were um, an example. If you were doing a case study of a band that had strong imagery
Mm-hmm.
and it was on the right side of getting some commercial airplay and having a trajectory career for a little while,
Mm-hmm.
and a band that sort of had the wrong side of the imagery and the trajectory was in a different direction. I think it's a good case study to compare W.A.S.P and Twisted Sister. Twisted
Yeah.
Sister had very strong imagery. They had a song called We're Not Going to Take It, which is sort of like, if you compare it to School Days, is like a fist in the air for teenage angst and authority figures. It,
Mm-hmm.
it was friendly enough and sort of on the right side to get MTV play and become a hit
Mm-hmm.
and
Yep.
generate millions of copies being sold worldwide. However, with W.A.S.P, they put stuff out like F Like a Beast. They have the S&M imagery, which I know is part of their show. And a lot of parents would say, no, you're not having that in the house. That sort of inhibited
Yeah.
their career. So if they wanted to go down that path and be something really underground and almost punk, and Marilyn Manson before or Marilyn Manson, then they should have done it from the get-go
Yeah.
and continued right through. But by just putting your toes in the water of doing, okay, let's make a name for ourselves. Let's be
Mm-hmm.
shock. And then we'll retreat and do the last command and make it more MTV friendly. And I'm not saying Last Command, as I said, is a bad album. It's musically, it's quite interesting, and further tone down the image with Inside the Electric Circus, where there's no makeup, and you actually see like Blackie how he actually looks as just a metal dude, lives in
Yeah.
Texas or Arizona or wherever he lives. So I think that their first initial statement, they put it out there, they're aggressive, and then they retreat, and that's where they lost a hell of a lot of momentum.
I agree.
And they were just too strong. So it's all about marketing. It's all about business plan. And I think they just miscalculated it. Where Twisted Sister, for that one album, they had their moment in the shade. But,
Well,
subsequent albums were just,
yeah.
yeah.
Oh yeah. It just went downhill. But you look at the video for We're Not Going to Take It and I Want to Rock. I
Yeah.
mean, yeah, it certainly doesn't help that you have Niedermeyer from
Yep.
Animal House. You
Yep.
have this complete comedic violence all through the videos, which that certainly didn't hurt. But then you look at the videos that W.A.S.P did on I Want to Be Somebody, which is mainly a performance clip. Yeah, you got these other little things kind of sprinkled
Mm,
in, and they got a lot of flack for the way the video is shot. But if you listen to the lyrics, it's actually a pretty positive kind of song.
yeah.
There's
And
really nothing,
that's why I sort of think
you
that
know.
Twisted Sister was a sort of democracy. Dee Schneider is a very strong character, but I think he had a
Hmm.
lot of the I mean, he's been around the block like Blackie. Like that Twisted Sister were huge in New York. They were like a local band. They would sell out halls.
Oh yeah.
And then they finally broke. And I think
Yeah.
as a democracy within the band, you've got a couple of other dudes that say, D, that's not a good idea and we don't support it. So, but Blackie's running the show. And I think that's sort of has affected his career because there is nobody strong enough or on an equal footing that is able to sanity check and sort of say, no, this kind of stinks. I don't think this is the right direction. And he's done that path. And it is what it is, basically. So
yeah,
two ways they could have done it. They could have, they had Rod Smallwood, the Iron Maiden manager. They could have done it that path. But I think, just tone down the imagery because some of the S&M is really going to sort of make it very narrow for your commercial type of prospects in that sort of environment.
Yeah. Yeah. And it did. and then if they really wanted to truly put their, then they were like, okay, Marilyn Manson, you're going to have some fun. Well, yeah, let's just outdo you. And then this album comes out in 1997.
But it's too late.
Yeah. It really was.
People think of that initial album and being in hair metal, and it's too late. Because I know Blackie was trying so hard to reinvent himself as a serious musician. Crimson Idol, but it was probably too late. And in rock, unfortunately, your first impressions are the mostest. There's no such word, but I'm just saying it.
I like it.
It's the mostest. It's the first step. It's the first footprint. And that's what people are going to remember you by.
Yep.
And they put that imagery out and it's too late. You can't reinvent yourself unless he maybe created a whole new band.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's great. Now, final thoughts in regards to it is where W.A.S.P are now. So Blackie has always been over at least the last 10 years said that he's now a born-again Christian. He's quite religious. And he's put a lot of albums that sort of allude to his religious convictions. And he's doing a tour of America. And it's had a bit of heat because there's been he hasn't toured United States for a considerable period of time. He's done Europe. And he has, I think he did an interview with Eddie Trunk that he's contemplating doing songs that he hasn't done for a considerable period of time in that early era that he sort of said he wouldn't do because of his religious conviction. How do you think how would he be able to reconcile that with a person of faith where he's going to be singing, material which is completely contradictory to his beliefs? What's your views on that?
I think in that interview with Eddie Trunk, he pretty much says it best. If you're going to do a tour that's called 40 years back to the beginning, how can you not do that song? And yeah, he says he stopped doing it. One, yes, because of the religious beliefs, but two was that W.A.S.P was becoming a totally different kind of band. They got away from the tongue-in-cheek humor kind of stuff. And when you listen to when you start listening to songs like albums like hang on, got to get the right ones here. Unholy Terror, for example. You have songs like Nevermore and Charisma and who's the next one, Dying for the World, actually is the one I really wanted. This is like the album he writes after 9/11, and there's some songs dedicated to the hallowed ground, and there's just some really serious stuff that he gets into. Even Crimson Idol has a serious undertone. Headless Children has a serious undertone. But when he started professing faith, and you get an album like Golgotha with the title tracks, and he's singing, "Jesus, I need you now." it sent chills down my spine because I do profess Christianity. I profess that myself. There's a long story that goes with that, and WASP is a part of that. But anyway, how does he reconcile that? I look at it this way: if the fans want to hear the song, as far as I'm concerned, he should just play the song. I bet the crowd will know every single word. They'll probably sing it for him.
Yeah. Do you
You know?
do you understand the view that it kind of hypocritical that like for him to sing "If Like a Beast," which
Oh,
we
absolutely.
both agree. Even in the day, I thought it was just a crap song.
Oh yeah.
And
I
for
mean,
him to sing that or contemplate that, people would say, well, that's just completely contradictory to
and I
sing.
agree
How do
with
you
you.
justify that? So I think it's going to be a flashpoint, and I don't think you and I are totally going to sort of reconcile it,
Yeah.
because
I
there is a questionable aspect to it, and
I agree.
it's sort of like lends it to maybe, you know, for me to have a commercially successful tour, I have to mine that back catalogue.
Yeah.
And people are
But
not
it
going to be interested in listening to the last couple of albums that were of
which is a
this,
shame.
yeah, which are
But
going
again,
down that path.
if you're gonna call the tour back to the beginning,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah, that's I agree. I mean, I don't know how he's gonna work that out, but if he plays it, I guess I can't.
yeah,
I guess maybe for the 3 or 5 minutes when I go see
yeah,
them in Atlanta, Georgia, I guess I'll be 15 years old again and just you know.
yeah,
But
yeah.
but
It'll be interesting to see how he explains that. But I think that's controversial. But
but
hey,
I think at the same time, if he doesn't do it, he's going to have a lot of backlash from all the diehard fans. I think who have been begging him to play that song.
yep, yeah.
You know, I
Look,
don't know.
he is a very larger than life controversial figure, and I don't
Yeah.
think we've even scraped the surface. I think he's very complex,
Mhm.
and um, a lot of the stories I've read about it is he's definitely got a number of different layers. But again, there is a man of mystique, because at least in the last 10 to 15 years, he doesn't do a lot of press, and he's very careful in what he does in respect of social media and what he actually puts out
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
But one thing that can't be denied, he's had a very interesting path, and he's got an interesting story to tell. I mean, man, he's connected to the New York Dolls, London, that early Sunset
Mm-hmm.
Boulevard metal scene,
Mm-hmm.
which was, pioneering. W.A.S.P. and his later years. He's definitely, whether you like him or not, he's an interesting character and has an interesting story. And
Yep.
look, we should do this again. As I
Uh,
said, we've just covered the first album, and it's been really, really good talking to you.
yeah. I
And
like I said, any day.
just covering this, because, as I said, he's got a number of layers. So
Yeah.
there you
Any
go.
day, any day to talk about WASP is a good day for me. So I'm no complaints. I
Absolutely,
appreciate you having me
absolutely.
on with doing this.
Absolutely. And before we wrap it up, have you got anything to plug? Any new shows? You did something recently, Adrian's.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I did a little. So my music channel is called the My Music Corner. I may just take the my part off, but it's my little music corner is basically what it is. Um, I just did a video recently talking about the Adrian Smith solo album he did in 1989, just called Adrian Smith and Project, the Silver and Gold album, and just trying to show the album a little bit of love because I've seen a lot of people just rip that album to shreds. And I'm like, come on, there's got to be somebody out there that likes this album, right? So I just wanted to show the album a little love. It's still one of my favorite albums. I love listening to it now and then. But um, other than that, I've got a couple things in my head, just finding the time to put it together and
Absolutely.
see what I can
Yeah.
do.
Well, I really sort of endorse everyone to check out your channel, and I really
Yeah,
like that chat. And yeah, no, it was really fun having you on today.
yeah. Thank
So
you again,
everyone,
Peter. I appreciate it.
absolutely, we'll do it again. So everyone, please subscribe to Rock Daydream Nation. Got plenty of content upcoming. We've got a super group chat that by the time you see this clip has already dropped or about to drop, and that's going to be a lot of fun. Where we, we've got all these 10 scientists in the rock and roll laboratory putting together a band out of Van Halen, Aerosmith, Blue Oyster Cult, Kiss, and yeah, that's
Rush.
just gonna, and Rush. So that's gonna be a total gas. So anyway, please subscribe, and we'll catch you later. See ya.